ever feel like, life is this balancing act between those big epic moments and then just the everyday stuff, trying to keep it all from, well, falling apart?
Yeah, like a constant juggling act.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're diving into today. The Israelites' journey in Numbers, chapters 10 through 12.
Okay, so they've just come down from Mount Sinai.
Right. They've had this incredible experience receiving the 10 Commandments.
Talk about an epic moment.
No kidding. But then it's like, okay, now what?
Right, back to reality.
Back to the desert.
Which, let's be honest, is not the most forgiving place.
Not at all. And that's what makes this part of their story so fascinating. It's this study in contrast. You have this divine revelation, and then the very human challenges of figuring out how to actually function as a nation.
It's like the ultimate test. They've been freed from slavery. They've received these laws.
They've got this incredible covenant with God.
Exactly. But now they've got to figure out how to put it all into practice, and they're doing it while literally wandering in the wilderness.
And that's what we're going to unpack, how these stories, thousands of years old, still speak to those enduring human struggles. I mean, we're talking leadership dramas, doubts, complaints.
Oh, yeah, they definitely had their moments, just like we do.
Exactly. And they had those moments even with God guiding them every step of the way. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think it's fitting that we start with trumpets.
Okay, now I have to admit, when I think ancient Israelites, trumpets aren't exactly the first thing that come to mind.
Right. You've got the Exodus, the Red Sea, Mount Sinai.
Like all the Hollywood stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But trumpets, it's actually brilliant when you think about it. Numbers 10 goes into great detail about how they were used. 2 trumpets blown together. That was like the emergency broadcast system of the ancient world. Everyone knew that means drop everything, get to the tent of meeting.
Wow. So it was a way to communicate with this massive group of people all at once.
Exactly. And not just any communication, but divinely ordained communication. Think about it. They've gone from a group of former slaves to a nation on the move with a divinely ordained communication system.
It makes you wonder what we could accomplish with that kind of clarity today.
Seriously. Just imagine one trumpet blast and everyone knows exactly what it means. No confusion.
I mean, we see this even today, don't we? That need for clear communication, especially when you're talking about big groups, important tasks.
All the time. Look at disaster relief efforts, military maneuvers, even just planning a music festival.
It's all about logistics.
Precisely. You need that clear communication, that organization, to function effectively. And the Israelites, they were figuring this out on a massive scale, fresh out of Egypt.
It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about the logistics of it all. I mean, Numbers 10 doesn't just mention trumpets. It goes into detail about the marching formation, each tribe with its place.
It's like supersized organization 101. Each tribe had its assigned position, its leader, its specific role.
Talk about attention to detail. It really makes you appreciate a good project manager, that's for sure.
Right. But think about what's happening here. This meticulous organization, even if it's divinely inspired, it was essential for their survival. They're transitioning from a scattered group of freed slaves into a structured society.
It's like the ultimate test in teamwork, but with much higher stakes than your average office retreat.
Definitely not your average trust fall exercise. But speaking of leadership, it gets even more interesting when we get to the story of Moses and Hobab.
Oh yeah, this is where we see that even with divine guidance, sometimes you need a little local knowledge.
Exactly. Moses has a direct line to God, right?
You'd think he'd have all the answers.
Right. But in Numbers 10, we see Moses seeking out Hobab, his father-in-law, who just happens to know the wilderness like the back of his hand.
Right.
He's like, hey, we could really use your expertise here.
Even with God on speed dial, sometimes you need to consult with someone who knows the terrain. It speaks volumes, don't you think? It really makes you think twice, Like, even when you think you've got it all figured out, sometimes it's that local knowledge.
That firsthand experience.
Exactly. That can make all the difference. And speaking of needing a shortcut, can we talk about the manna situation? This is where we start to see some, shall we say, are we there yet, vibes from the Israelites.
Oh, the manna complaints. It's one of those things where reading it today, it's like, really? You're getting gourmet meals delivered daily and you're complaining.
I know, right? It sounds pretty nice in theory. But I guess what's amazing is how the text gets at this very human tendency to take things for granted.
And the psychology of it is fascinating. They're in the desert. They're getting this miraculous food.
Which, let's be honest, we don't even know exactly what it was.
Right. But the text emphasizes that it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Every single day. So imagine after weeks, months of this.
I'd probably be craving a good burger or, some variety.
Exactly. It starts to wear on you. And I think that's the brilliance of this story. Even something miraculous, initially perceived as good, can become monotonous. That awe fades.
It's like the new phone feeling, right? Amazing for a week, and then it's just your phone.
Precisely. And it reveals so much about us, about human nature. The constant tension between gratitude for what we have and that desire for the next best thing.
It never ends. And let's not forget, in the middle of all this, you've got Moses trying to lead this massive group of people who are starting to sound a bit like, well...
Hangry toddlers.
Okay, yeah, that's one way to put it. I can't even imagine the stress of that. And that's where Numbers 11 takes an interesting turn. Moses, understandably, is feeling the weight of this leadership role.
He cries out to God, feeling overwhelmed. He needs help. He needs to delegate. And what happens?
God gives him a leadership training seminar.
Not quite a seminar, but God does instruct Moses to gather 70 elders to share the burden of leadership. It's like divine delegation.
Okay, so far so good. But of course, this is the Bible, so there's always a twist.
Always. Enter Eldad and Medad. Now, these two, they didn't make it to the big leadership meeting, but back at the camp, they suddenly start prophesying.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you can almost hear the gasps from the crowd. Are they allowed to do that?
That's kind of a big deal, right? They're challenging the system, the established hierarchy.
And it leads to this really interesting question about leadership. Does it always have to look a certain way? Can it come from unexpected places?
It's like they're throwing out the rule book, or at least adding a few new pages.
And Moses, to his credit, he doesn't freak out. He sees the good, the potential,
Yeah.
even if it's coming from an unexpected source.
It's a good lesson, I think, for any leader in any era. Don't get so caught up in how things should be that you miss out on what's actually working. But speaking of unexpected, can we talk about the quail incident?
Oh boy, the quail. A classic case of be careful what you wish for.
They were so over the manna, they were practically begging for meat.
And God delivers, but not just a few quails for dinner.
We're talking mountains of quail, right? Like enough to bury the entire camp.
Numbers 11 really emphasizes the excess, the sheer volume of it, and of course they overdo it.
Well, after weeks of manna cakes, who can blame them? But it does make you think about that human tendency to go from one extreme to the other.
Right. It's not enough to have enough. We often swing from deprivation to overindulgence, and that's where the real lesson of the quail lies, I think. It's not that enjoying abundance is wrong, but that even with divine provision, there's responsibility.
It's like that saying, too much of a good thing can be, well, too much.
Exactly. And it's a pattern we see throughout history, isn't it? It's our relationship with food, with material possessions, with that constant desire for more, even when we have enough.
It's like we're wired for that constant cycle of wanting, isn't it?
It's a deep part of the human experience, that's for sure.
And speaking of deep, if we thought the quail drama was intense, buckle up. Because Numbers 12 takes us straight into a family feud for the ages.
Oh, this is a big one. We're talking Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Sibling rivalry on an epic scale.
And it's not just about who gets the bigger tent, right?
Not even close. This is about authority, about leadership, about who speaks for God.
Okay, so break it down for us. What sets them off?
Well, on the surface, it seems like Miriam and Aaron are questioning Moses' marriage to a Cushite woman. But if you look a little deeper...
There's always a deeper layer.
Always. It becomes about his leadership more broadly. They're challenging his authority, almost like a power struggle.
It's like they're saying, hey, we're prophets too, you know. We can hear from God.
Exactly. And they even use that language. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? It's a direct challenge.
So how does Moses take it? Does he try to defend himself?
He doesn't really need to, because God steps in, and let's just say his response is not subtle.
I imagine not. This is the God who parted the Red Sea, after all.
Exactly. He defends Moses, emphasizing his unique role as a prophet who speaks directly with God, face to face.
It's like God draws a line in the sand. You don't mess with my chosen leader.
And then, to really drive the point home, Miriam is struck with leprosy.
Wow. Okay, that escalated quickly. I mean, it's a powerful image, a stark consequence.
It's a reminder that challenging divinely appointed leadership, especially in this context, has serious consequences.
And it definitely makes you think about the role of dissent, of speaking out against those in power. Even today, it's a complicated issue.
Absolutely. Especially when we're talking about religious contexts, where those lines between divine authority and human leadership can get blurry.
It makes you wonder, what were Miriam and Aaron really after? Were they driven by jealousy, by a genuine concern for the direction of the Israelites, or something else entirely?
It's a question that scholars still debate. Were they trying to usurp Moses' authority, Or were they highlighting what they saw as a blind spot in his leadership?
And what about the fact that it's Miriam who bears the brunt of God's anger? Why single her out?
It's a question that continues to spark debate and different interpretations. Was it because she was a woman in a leadership position challenging a man? Was it because her prophetic role came with a different set of responsibilities?
So many layers. It's hard to know for sure, but it certainly adds to the complexity of the story.
And I think that's the beauty of diving deep into these ancient texts. They don't give us easy answers. Instead, they challenge us to wrestle with these enduring questions about leadership, faith, and the consequences of our actions.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Numbers 10 through 12, what are some of the key takeaways we can carry with us?
Well, for me, it's a powerful reminder that even with divine guidance, the human experience is messy. We're going to make mistakes, we're going to struggle, we're going to question and doubt.
It's like the terrain might change, but those internal struggles, those are timeless and universal.
Exactly. And while we might not be wandering through the desert with a cloud of fire as our guide, these stories offer us a glimpse into the challenges of leadership, the importance of communication and order, and the constant tension between our desires and what's truly good for us.
It's a good reminder that even thousands of years later, we're still asking some of the same questions, facing some of the same dilemmas.
And maybe, just maybe, by exploring these ancient stories, we can learn something about ourselves and find a bit more wisdom for navigating the wildernesses in our own lives.
It's a journey worth taking, that's for sure.
Welcome to Charlie and Mia's podcast. We're embarking on an exciting journey to read through the entire Bible in just 1 year. Every day, we dive into Scripture, exploring its meanings and how it applies to our lives today. We invite you to join us on this incredible adventure of learning and discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode.